I'm here with Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Alexander, let's talk about the Horowitz testimony that he gave to the Senate. And he outlined his report. He took questions from various senators as to, what he meant in his 478-page document that he published on Monday. And I think the purpose of this video, at least for me, and I want to hear from you as to how you pull it off. Why I want to do this video is because just about all the mainstream media outside of Fox News, and a lot of the alternative media as well, has been focused on pushing the narrative of no political bias. The whole thing, Russiagate, all that stuff, surveillance, spying, coup, narrative has been debunked because Horowitz said no political bias. Now, you hinted at this in a prior video, but I really want you to dig into it now that we've heard from the man himself. And I've got a lot of passages to read from you, but I want you to just kind of take us there, and then I'll start reading you some of the passages that I have from the Horowitz testimony, some quotes from Horowitz. So yeah. Begin the video, Alexander, with this political bias narrative.
Yeah, but before I do, and I'll just to quickly say something about the testimony that Horowitz gave, which I thought was compelling. But I got the distinct impression that he is exasperated and angry by the way people have been reading this point about no political bias into his report. The point I really have to make this point about Horowitz. I made it before, and I'm going to make it again. We've now had several reports from Horowitz. Horowitz is the Inspector General of the FBI. He is the FBI's internal compliance officer. His job is to see whether or not procedures are followed and whether basic rules and regulations are abided by. He cannot investigate the FBI. He is not there to research and look into this question, ultimately, of whether FBI officials, when he speaks to them, are telling the truth. Sometimes, and he does this actually quite often into his report, he expresses puzzlement or bafflement or surprise about some of the things they are saying to him. He also notes omissions in the things that they are saying. But ultimately, his remit is very restricted. And people just don't seem to either want to understand that, or, and this is the case, obviously, with people like Comey, and with mainstream media and with some of the Democratic Party politicians who most definitely do understand it, they want to conceal the fact. So they are reading more into Horowitz's comments about bias than is actually there. I want to just say one very quick thing about this. What Horowitz said is that when Crossfire Hurricane started, there were certain things that the FBI got this information. They got this information from this friendly foreign government, which we all know is Australia, and Australia told them that their diplomat had met with George Papadopoulos, and George Papadopoulos had told Downer from a source which we now know is Joseph Mifsud, about the Russians holding dirt on Hillary Clinton. So they had that. They also had the evidence which they claim to have about the hacking of the DNC computers and about the Russians leaking the emails that they got as a result of that hack to WikiLeaks to influence the election. The first things to say, Horowitz is not able to look behind that. He can't go around and reinvestigate this question of whether or not there was a hack. That's not something he's able to do. Similarly, Horowitz can't come along and say, well, the evidence that they're getting from the Australians and from Downer is incredibly thin, and you shouldn't really start an investigation on the basis of it. All he can say is, did they actually have information upon which to start an investigation? He says that they did, which in a way, in a sense, they did. But he also says, and is concerned by the fact that an investigation could be started on that very low threshold of evidence. He actually uses those words, very low threshold of evidence. And he also says that he is concerned about the way in which key decisions in this investigation could apparently be taken by very low-ranking FBI officers, always, of course, having to accept the assurances that he was repeatedly given that more senior officers in the FBI were not involved. Horowitz plants many suspicions. It's for other people to take what he has found and explore these questions and ask themselves whether it is really plausible that the FBI would start this kind of investigation into a presidential campaign on such thin evidence and would actually have done so without bias. Before you proceed, there's just one other point I want to make, which is, of course, that Horowitz has repeatedly made the point that the evidence that the FBI was using, which was Papadopoulos and Steele's dossier, as the investigation progressed, that evidence disintegrated, such as it was, and yet they persisted. Why did they persist? Why did they persist for 2 years after the investigation? The basis of the investigation had collapsed. Why did they go on beyond June 2017, when it was all really over? I think the answer is obvious. It must be bias. There is no other explanation for it. I mean, they're obviously searching to find something. They're searching to find something, and they were trying to construct a case of obstruction against Donald Trump. But clearly there was bias. All the facts in Horowitz's report point to it. We mustn't fault the man because he's prevented from saying it. It's a huge difference between something that he's not able to say and what the facts say. And the facts, in my opinion, are very...
Okay, Alexander, I'm going to read you some quotes from various people via Twitter, and I just want you to comment on them. So I'll read you the first quote from Donald Trump Jr. The first tweet. What conveniently no one is saying about IG Horowitz's testimony today is that while he said in the report, there's no bias as to how the investigation started, low threshold, based on everything else, he said there is an insane amount of bias from that point forward. Alexander, what are your thoughts?
Yes, I mean, he doesn't. I mean, he's careful not to talk about bias in those ways. What he is saying is that investigation should not have continued in the way that it did, and he points to this escalating pattern of abuse in the information that's provided to the FISA court. The FBI is getting more and more information, pointing ever more clearly to the way in which the whole FISA applications are becoming corrupted as the FBI, getting more and more information from the investigation, which shows that there is no basis to that investigation, is failing to pass up that information to the FISA court. The only explanation for that is bias. There can be no other.
Okay, so we have a tweet from Stephen Chung, and it's with Lindsey Graham, an exchange between Lindsey Graham and Horowitz. Senator Lindsey Graham on FBI surveilling the Trump campaign. Quote, let's put it this way. If you don't have a legal foundation to surveil somebody and you keep doing it, it is that bad. IG Michael Horowitz, quote, absolutely. Graham, Quote, is that spying? Horowitz. Quote, it's illegal surveillance, end quote. What do you make of that?
Well, it's spying. I mean, that's what Horowitz has said. Illegal surveillance. He's admitted it. It's in his report. He says they had no basis to go on with this surveillance, and yet the surveillance didn't just continue. It escalated. It got bigger. They weren't just using, wiretap evidence. They were getting lots, by the way, many more informers than we know about. There were all sorts of people being introduced to people like Papadopoulos, to Flynn, to Carter Page, people who were, leading them in conversation. There were FBI agents hanging around with tape recorders, secret tape recorders and wires, listening in to what all of these people were saying. It got worse and worse and worse as the investigation continued, even though there was no basis for continuing with that investigation. Horowitz himself says it. That is illegal surveillance. Of course it is. It is spying. What other word can you give for it?
Okay, now this is a key point during the testimony because it involves Richard Blumenthal, a Democrat, I believe from Connecticut. And this is a tweet via Chuck Ross, and he has the exchange here. The tweet reads like this, Alexander. Oof. Blumenthal, quote, FISAs are renewed because they are producing useful information, correct? IG Horowitz, quote, or they should be producing useful information. Blumenthal, quote, they were producing useful information, correct? Horowitz's response, quote, I'm not sure that's entirely correct. That was devastating.
Well, it was absolutely devastating because, in fact, they were producing information. They were producing information that were undermining the assumptions upon which the applications for the FISA warrants were being made. To be, again, very clear, by May 2017, June at the latest, the FBI had all the information in their possession which proved conclusively that there had been no collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians. They knew it, yet they continued even after that date to apply for more and more FISA warrants. And of course, special counsel was appointed in May 2017, and he continued, that's Robert Mueller, he continued with the investigation for another 2 years. Obviously, that was wrong. It is gross abuse. It is completely wrong.
Okay, let's get to the main exchange here, Alexander, which I'm taking an excerpt via an article from Epoch Times, which reads with the title, IG Horowitz doesn't rule out political bias, may have played a role in FISA abuse. Senator John Kennedy, Republican from Louisiana, pressed Horowitz on the role political bias could have played in the FISA warrant on Page. Earlier in the day, and in his report, Horowitz concluded that political bias didn't play a role in the FBI's decision to start an investigation into potential Russian involvement in the Trump campaign. Eventually, Horowitz replied, I think it's fair for people to sit there and look at all of these 17 events and wonder how it could be purely incompetence. He also said that he agrees completely with the assertion that someone at the FBI needs to be fired. The culture also needs to be changed at the FBI, he added. After being questioned by Senator Mike Lee, Republican from Utah, the Inspector General also said he couldn't rule out bias in later stages of the FBI's investigation. Isn't the lack of evidence on bias evidence that we really should take as bias? But it's, in any event, it's certainly not itself indicative that no bias occurred. Isn't that correct? Lee asked him. Quote, as to the opening of the probe, which is in a different place than the FISA issues that you have identified, and I talked about earlier, I think it's two different situations. On the FISA side, we found, as you noted, a lack of documentary and testimonial evidence about intentionality. But we noted the lack of satisfactory explanations. and in fact, leave open the possibility, for the reasons you indicated, it is unclear what the motivations were. On the one hand, gross incompetence, negligence. On the other hand, intentionality. And we're in between. We weren't in a position with the evidence we had to make that conclusion. But we are not ruling it out, Horowitz replied. What do you make of that exchange between Lee and Horowitz? We do not rule it out.
Well, of course he doesn't rule it out. He doesn't rule it out in his report. I mean, I think people are not reading his report properly. The point is, Horowitz looks at, in his report, what the FBI has done. He says the FBI acted appallingly. It is for other people to take that information now and to find out whether or not there was a political agenda, in other words, bias behind this. Horowitz is not ruling it out because he cannot do so. That's not his job, either to rule it out or to rule it in. All he can say in his report is that based on the information which was provided to him by the FBI officials he interviewed, there was no evidence of bias. But that doesn't mean that evidence isn't there. Someone else who's able to go behind that information which Horowitz was provided could certainly find evidence of that bias. Can I just give an example of what I am saying? Bear in mind that the FBI are now relying very heavily on George Papadopoulos being the reason why Crossfire Hurricane was initiated. This has become their alibi. They're all agreeing that this has nothing to do with the Steele dossier, all about George Papadopoulos. But as we've discussed in previous videos, how did it come about that George Papadopoulos got to know Joseph Mifsud? Who is Joseph Mifsud? Was that meeting in a hotel in London in April 2016 between Joseph Mifsud and Papadopoulos, was it staged? Were the people from the FBI or from other intelligence agencies listening? Was the conversation recorded when Mifsud said to Papadopoulos about the Russians possessing dirt on Hillary Clinton or emails of Clinton? Was that in fact actually pre-prepared and pre-designed? Was the meeting between Papadopoulos and Alexander Downer, which happened so soon after, just a few weeks after, was that also pre-prepared, and by whom? I mean, if we are looking at a dangle, in other words, at a setup, which is what Papadopoulos says it was, then of course the whole thing is biased. Horowitz can't do that. Durham can. Horowitz can't talk to people like Mifsud. Durham can. That's the point to understand.
Horowitz can't go to Rome and find Mifsud. He can't go to London and speak with Halper. He can't interview Papadopoulos. What I'm understanding from this, and correct me if I'm wrong, is Horowitz is basically saying, in layman's terms, he's saying, look, all I could interview were FBI employees.
And agents. I mean, people like
agents, yeah. FBI agents.
You can interview Christopher Steele because Christopher Steele is an FBI informant. Christopher Steele tried to argue, by the way, that he wasn't. And Horowitz says absolutely clearly he was an FBI informer. On that basis, he's able to interview Christopher Steele. He can interview people who are employed by the FBI and people who work for the FBI. He can't go outside that.
So he's only getting opinions and facts and quote unquote evidence, let's call it that, from FBI people.
Correct.
He can't get any other viewpoints whatsoever. And so the way I interpreted his response to Senator Lee was, look, I can't judge their motivations and their intentions because all I can judge is the only thing I have to go on is what Comey is telling me. That's it.
Correct. That's exactly
Comey's telling me there was no political bias. Horowitz is saying, what can I do? That's the only conclusion I can come to because I can't interview Mifsud and Papadopoulos and all these other people.
That is exactly correct. That is exactly right. That is how to understand this report. But Horowitz gets all this information from the FBI. He can't find bias, but he finds all these other horrifying things. He finds a systematic and complete collapse in the whole way in which the FBI conducts surveillance of members of a presidential campaign during a presidential election. And what does he say? That is illegal surveillance.
Right, because
if it's illegal, that is an invitation for someone else to actually, find out why it's illegal and to punish those people who are responsible. And of course, he says people should be punished.
Right, because outside of the testimony of people like Comey and Steele and all these people that worked for the FBI, were consultants of the FBI, Horowitz also went through documents and procedures and things like that, once again, related to the FBI. So you could say, look, these procedures and these documents were falsified, or they don't add up, or some really bad stuff was taking place.
Yeah, I mean, we know exactly. We know one document was falsified, and it was falsified by an FBI lawyer, and that was a very serious falsification. It misrepresented completely. It completely misrepresented what another intelligence agency had said to the FBI about Carter Page. It made out it was falsified to make it seem that Carter Page was not a source, when in fact he was. So, I mean, but there may have been lots of other cases of falsification. This is not something that Horowitz is able to do. He has the documents in front of him. He's able to compare documents when words are inserted into an email, as they were in this case. He can see that, and he can speak to the FBI officer, who in that instance, by the way, admitted that he'd inserted the words into the email. So that's why there can be a referral for criminal investigation. But he's not able to look at other documents, which on the face of it may look all right, but in fact are not, and go into the sort of backstory of how these documents was created, and really examine files and speak to people and subject them to the kind of investigative process that is really the kind of process that you need to expose things like that. So he can only look at the surface. He can't go below it. But it's extraordinary how much he has been able to find simply by looking at things on the surface.
Great point. Just by looking at the FISA docs, we've uncovered so much. And I just want to remind all our viewers, and my final point is this, Alexander, so you can close out the video. There is so much more to this story outside of the FBI and the FISA docs. Granted, that's an important part. But you've got Ukraine, you've got Australia, you've got London, you've got Halper, you've got Mifsud, you've got Chalupa, you've got the DNC, you've got CrowdStrike. There is a lot of ground.
And you forgot, and the CIA, and the NSA,
CIA, yes,
and the Aldney people, and we now learned that the Pentagon's intelligence agency, the Office of Net Assessment, that they were involved also. So there's huge numbers of people involved, and
a lot of ground to cover.
A lot of ground to cover, and Horowitz was not able to talk to any of these people. He wasn't even able to talk to Carter Page or Michael Flynn or Paul Manafort, any of these people. Durham can, and hopefully is and will. That's the difference.
Final question. Comey, McCabe are running around saying they are vindicated. What do you make of that?
Well, I think that Horowitz actually answered that. He said his report vindicates no one. And that's exactly right. They're not being vindicated. It's the exact opposite. What this whole thing shows is that Comey and McCabe presided over illegal surveillance by the FBI. That is, again, Horowitz's expression. Those are his words. And I would go even further a totally corrupt investigation, because this is what this was, which broke so many rules, broke so many principles about of the way in which investigations like this should be conducted, and which was, as we saw, went into straightforward illegality. Again, Horowitz's words, not mine. By the way, can I just add one other point quickly about political bias? Apparently, right at the very beginning, when Crossfire Hurricane is set up, there are already concerns about Strzok and Lisa Page. And one of the people who was involved was saying, you know, is it really appropriate to have Peter Strzok involved in conducting this investigation because he's so close to Lisa Page? And this is given some consideration, and the FBI said, you know, well, he's fine. We'll leave him to be the actual lead agent on it. And of course, as we know, Peter Strzok was incredibly biased against Trump, and his bias against Trump was widely known within the FBI.
Yeah, we have the text messages.
No, we don't just have the text messages. I mean, it seems that, you know, Peter Strzok never made any great secret of his views.
Incredible.
So there you are.
That's some sort of,
and Lisa Page,
some sort of agent.
And Lisa Page also. I mean, she never made any secret of her views.
Jeez, what a bunch of buffoons.
And the FBI all knew that they were having an affair. And as I said, there were concerns about that. There were concerns that you know, Strzok's affair with Page was putting him in a position where that was tangling up the chain of command and creating all kinds of issues. But you know, they weren't concerned about that. And that was right at the very beginning. I mean, later on, of course, as we know, they do other bizarre things. And I mean, they have Bruce Orr talking to Christopher Steele, even after they've theoretically sacked Christopher Steele, and Bruce Orr is acting as their sort of back channel to Christopher Steele, and Bruce Orr is talking to Glenn Simpson, and all that is going on in the background. I mean, there's so much wrong here that, you know, it's difficult to know where to begin and where to stop. All I would say is, by the way, that it completely vindicates our reporting. What we've been saying for the last 2 years, we've been talking about the problems with exactly. We've been talking about you know, the FISA warrants being wrong. We've been talking about Strzok and Page. We've been talking about the fact that informers were being used all over the place. I mean, to an extent that really is astonishing. I mean, we only know what the
and the Adam Schiff memo.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, the way we have read this thing has been completely vindicated. Completely vindicated. And I'm going to say something, actually, which is a personal thing, which is that when Mueller was appointed, I foolishly thought that, you know, he was going to be the man who's going to bring this whole nonsense to a stop. And I predicted, that was in May 2016, that it was all going to go 2017, sorry, May 2017, that the whole Russiagate thing would collapse in early summer 2017. Well, it didn't collapse in early summer 2017, but it should have done. It should have done. In fact, we now know that for a fact. We know for an absolute fact. And of course, Mueller knew things that in May 2017, I didn't, you didn't, we at the Duran didn't have access to this material. But in fact, again, we got it right. It should have ended then. The biggest scandal in all of this, there's two huge scandals. Firstly, there is a huge scandal about how Crossfire Hurricane is launched right in the middle of a presidential election and is used to spy on a presidential campaign. I mean, that is absolutely terrible, and there is really no justification for it. The evidence to do it, as William Barr, the Attorney General, has said, was incredibly thin and simply didn't warrant anything like that. And if they were going to do it, if there were real concerns, they should have spoken to Donald Trump about it, and they didn't do that. So that's one thing. But the other thing that is beyond scandalous is that they persisted with this thing for 2 years after they had all the information to hand, which told them that there was no collusion and that the whole collusion theory was wrong.
Alexander, can I make a final comment after listening to you here? And even though this video is running a little long, listening to how you described Page and Strzok, to me, it just sounds like such poor management on the part of McCabe and Comey, such stupidity. Any manager would have realized that, Strzok could not have been on this case. Well, and that this whole thing with Lisa Page, had to be resolved. Anyone with any common sense. Number one, you mentioned Mueller. After the Mueller testimony, we realized that Mueller is really not that bright. He didn't even write the thing, his report. We actually realized he's clueless. We have Rosenstein, who was sitting there and joking with them and laughing with them about spying and a wiretap and all that stuff. We have Clapper purging himself over and over again. I've lost count how many times he's lied under oath, Clapper and Brennan and all these guys. These are really stupid people in very powerful positions. I'm starting to believe that. Stupid people in powerful positions who think they're the smartest guys in the room. There was a documentary about Enron and the collapse called The Smartest Guy in the Room, something like that. These guys think they're very smart, but listening to you and your closing statements, all these people are dummies. They're really dummy.
Yeah, they are extreme. There is appalling management and profound stupidity. One of the most bizarre things about this is that, frankly, reading all of this, I get the distinct impression that some people in the FBI believe the collusion story, incredible though it was.
Dummies.
I know, absolutely, and took the Steele dossier seriously, bizarre and ridiculous though it is. But I don't buy the idea that it is just stupidity. There comes a point beyond which the evidence of incompetence becomes so extreme, so many rules are broken, so many procedures are violated, so many facts are changed. As if we have evidence when we actually know that one crucial piece of evidence provided to the FISA court was tampered with. That one of the email was falsified by an FBI lawyer. I can't believe that this is just bad management and incompetence. It seems to me that there was a very clear agenda here. In fact, frankly, a malevolent agenda.
My point is you have to be stupid to go with that. To be an employee at the FBI and to actually do something like that, I'm trying to put myself in that situation. If someone, Comey, came to me or McCabe and said, "Hey, I want you to change it's FISA, doctorate," I'd be like, "Are you out of your mind? I'm not going to do that. That's dumb."
Yeah. Well, I know. Well, it was what we don't know is how many people were asked to do those things and refused. So let's remember that, and there may be all kinds of whistleblowers coming out. In fact, I'm hearing reports that there are all sorts of people coming and speaking to Duran about all kinds of things that were going on within the FBI, which haven't yet surfaced. But can I just make a further point about this, about stupidity and all this? It's essential to remember that all these people, and by the way, they admit it in the Horowitz report, all of these people were operating under an assumption that Hillary Clinton was going to win the election. They didn't think there was any possibility that Donald Trump would do so. And the result was there was all this desire to please Hillary and to help Hillary because they all thought they would be rewarded when it was all done. They didn't imagine that Trump would win and they'd be found out. And of course, what happened was after they were found out, they doubled down because they'd already gone so far. They'd done so much that was already grossly improper and terribly wrong that the temptation to do more and to try to construct a case and to find some way of getting Trump impeached so that they wouldn't themselves be investigated, it became irresistible. So that's what happened. That it seems to me is where they all went wrong. If they'd stopped in November 2016 and said to each other, well, look, we did terribly wrong. This has all been a disaster. But now let's try and find a way of, making it up with Trump somehow. Well, that might have worked. But by this point, they'd already got the media on the media moving. Christopher Steele was going around talking to the media. He was already complaining about his contacts with the FBI by that point. There were people like Schumer, Senator Schumer, making all kinds of complaints. Obama was asking for reports about all of this. The whole thing had spun out of control. And so they doubled down. And they doubled down disastrously. And I think more than stupidity, that is the explanation.
Arrogance and stupidity. The smart people, Alexander, are behind the curtain. The Obamas, the Clintons, the Soros, all these people. They're the real brains, and they're behind. They're hidden and protected by their power.
Well, indeed. Well, can I just say something? I mean, the really clever people don't get themselves in this situation because they do their job properly and they follow the rules. It's stupid people that get drawn into presidential intrigues of this nature because, as you rightly say, if things go wrong, it is they who will in the end pay the price, not Hillary Clinton. As we
she'll wash her hands of all of this if she has to.
Exactly. I mean, not Hillary Clinton.
She'll say.
Exactly. Well, exactly. Not Hillary Clinton, not Barack Obama, not even Loretta Lynch, I suspect.
They've been very quiet.
They will walk away. All right. They always, or at least they're always in a much better position to walk away. It's the McCabe's and the Strucks and the Lisa Pages. It's they who get into trouble in these kind of scenarios. And so it's not clever to play that sort of game at all. Can I just give an example of a really clever head of the FBI, very sinister man, but J. Edgar Hoover was nobody's fool. And when Richard Nixon came along to him at the early 70s and said, I want you to spy on my opponents for me because I'm concerned about all these leaks, the leaking of the Pentagon Papers and all the rest, Hoover said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm a law enforcer. That's not my job. And so Nixon had to, or decided that he had to, set up his own private research investigative agency, the so-called plumbers, and that's how that fell apart. Hoover, as I said, was a sinister man. This is not a defense of Hoover. It's just pointing out that he showed much more political nous than Comey, McCabe, and all that crowd did.
All right, we'll leave it there. Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Thank you very much. Guys, subscribe to the channel. Hit that like button. Find us on Soundcloud and iTunes. PayPal, Patreon, Subscribestar. Please donate. Check us out on Telegram. Download the app. Subscribe to our channel there. We post everything we do on Telegram. We'll also post this video on BitChute and Duran Video, which is our own video platform. So look us up there, duranvideo.com. And of course, Alexander, if you download the Telegram app, you'll get DRN20 discount. You also see it in the description box down below as well, DRN20. Put that in the checkout box, in the little box at checkout, and you'll get 20% off all merchandise on duranshop.com.
Absolutely. Merchandise like these marvelous magic mugs. Now, I have to say I've reverted today to my Russian Federation mug. I call it that because it's got the coat of arms of the Russian Federation there, same as you will find on Putin's mugs. But our mugs, I will stress and reiterate again, are much better. They are fantastic mugs, the best you will ever own. They're beautiful, beautiful porcelain, beautifully made, light and strong. They don't chip, and they keep your tea or coffee. I'm drinking tea at the moment. They keep your tea, your coffee warm, or your beer cold, whichever you prefer. So these are amazing mugs. We have lots of them, lots of types of mugs like this, but they keep us going through the long watches of the night. Some people pointed out that, I must have spent hours reading the Horowitz report. I did. So how could I have done that without refreshment from something like this? And we don't just have mugs, we got amazing shirts, like this polo shirt I'm wearing now, which I, by the way, wore the previous, the last night at a social event, and which are really stylish and elegant and comfortable to wear because they're beautifully made of 100% cotton. And we don't just have these amazing polo shirts, we have t-shirts, we've got long sleeve t-shirts, short sleeve t-shirts, we've also got hoodies, we've got hats. All our shirts come in many different colors. They all look incredibly stylish. They all have the Duran double-headed eagle, which you can see there, either embroidered or printed. They are fantastic items on our shop. They are perfect Christmas gifts. If you're searching around and thinking of what to get people for Christmas, this is the perfect Christmas gift for them. So what are you waiting for? DRN20, as Alex said, is the discount code. Come to our shop, buy our amazing things, and help the Duran as well. Alex will tell you how to do it.
Just go to the duranshop.com, DRN20 for 20% off all merchandise. Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Thank you very much. Till next time, everybody. Take care.